My name's Eric Hansen, and welcome to the second ever edition of Treelawn Talks. This is a weekly look at upcoming events at the Treelawn Music Hall and the Treelawn Social Club, both in Cleveland, Ohio at 15335 Waterloo Road. And this coming Wednesday, we're really excited to have in the big room, the Treelawn Music Hall, Geoffrey Keezer and Gillian Margot, the duo, at 7:30 p.m. We still have tickets at thetreelawn.com. Tickets will also be available at the door. We have student rates, we have special seating close to the stage, etc. And Geoffrey will be one of the first people to play our beautiful 1952 completely rebuilt Steinway D. So anyway, Geoffrey, thanks for being on the program.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So Geoffrey's one of the venerable players who's been out there. I remember hearing about him right when he came out of the gate, and he came out hard. Really very visible from the Midwest, like I am originally, and has been making really a lot of noise in the business as a performer and also as an educator, and really one of the most well-respected artists in the genre. And we're really thrilled to have him. And I'm especially into the smaller configuration, solo and duo. And so we have him with piano and voice coming up. Anyway, I wanted to talk kind of jump into that and then kind of go backwards for a bit. But can you talk more about this duo and how long you've done it and what we have to expect, like what type of repertoire you do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Gillian Margot is a vocalist from Toronto. She lives in New York now. And we met about 10 years ago via a mutual friend, and we started co-writing songs together, performing, recording, touring quite a bit. We made an album in 2018 called On My Way to You. And we're on this tour. We do a variety of songs. She's very adept in many genres. She sings beautiful jazz standards, ballads, things that are swinging in 4/4. She can sing pop, R&B. She sings great classical too. Although we're not going to we might hint a little bit at that. There's one Ellington piece we do called TGTT that was it's kind of a classical-ish kind of piece, but it's a variety of things. If you're into like the Great American Songbook, we've definitely got songs for you. If you like the singer-songwriter stuff, we'll throw a couple of those in there. So it's a nice variety of music and material and eras and tempos and styles, but all sort of filtered through our own kind of thing that we do. I think that's
awesome.
Good show. Yeah.
Have you played a lot with singers throughout your career? Okay.
Yeah, I have. I've worked with a lot of great singers, Gregory Porter, Dianne Reeves, many others, Kevin Mahogany, Diana Krall, Nancy King, Esperanza Spalding. I've had a lot of experience with singers. I do really love that particular collaboration between voice and piano and possibilities that it affords.
How is the duo thing with I know a lot of situations you're in a bigger group and there's a singer. I mean, the duo thing seems like, I don't know how to put it, but higher pressure almost, but it might be really comfortable too. I mean, So.
It's fun because it really is just a conversation between two people. And
right.
As long as you're on the same page, especially if it's really a true collaboration, it's not like the star and the accompanist.
Right.
Really where it's an interactive thing. And, the forms of the songs can be stretched a little bit. We might go from one song into another song. It's very playful and interactive, and
that's awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
I think everyone who pays attention knows that you came into the scene with an amazing story of just joining Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and it's sort of a movie-like story. It seems like from the outside to me, and I mean, you grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and how it? I understand it wasn't sort of just random by any chance, but that you had already been a devoted student of Blakey's music, et cetera. But if you could talk a little bit about how that happened and what effect it's had on you as a player.
Yeah. So Eau Claire, Wisconsin was a bit of a microclimate of music as well as weather. But it was really a great music scene there locally, a great university program. My father taught drums at the university in Eau Claire, and my mother taught French horn and voice privately and taught middle school band. And so I'm the only child of two music educators.
Whoa.
And my dad was the jazz guy, my mom was the classical guy. And so a lot of those records I heard growing up, those were in my parents' record collection. And I remember discovering a reissue of Kind of Blue that came out in my local record store when I was about in like mid '80s or something. And I went, Dad, look at this album, Behind the Blue. And he said, yeah, kid, I had that record when it came out. You know, he was in college when it came out. But he was a big fan of Art Blakey, and he took me and a bunch of friends. We drove 4 hours in a blizzard in February in like 1987 to see Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers at Lawrence University in Appleton,
Wow.
Wisconsin. And I fell in love with the music. I started playing that music with my own band of like-minded friends at home, and it just kind of one thing led to another. I met the pianist James Williams around the same time, who was Art Blakey's pianist and musical director in the late '70s and into the early '80s. And we became friends and started corresponding. And then when I would visit James in New York, he took me to meet Art Blakey one time, and he introduced me to him, and he recommended me for the job, and so on and so forth. But I felt like by the time I actually had a chance to play with Art, that it was kind of one of those law of attraction kind of things. I had been doing it for about 4 years and really putting a lot of my energy on that music, and I knew it all. So I was ready. I think musically, I don't think I was ready socially or psychologically for that band.
Oh,
But I knew the music.
that's awesome. I've watched a bunch of interviews where you discuss the topic, and obviously it's kind of a unusual story in a good way. But you described yourself as being pretty confident and almost feeling like almost fatalistic, like it was going to happen eventually. The worlds would meet, yours and Art Blakey.
Yeah.
Were you scared to death when you started playing there, or with him, or were you?
I think I was young and stupid and probably arrogant enough to not be. But it was surreal a bit. I always feel it felt like, I remember when the first Star Wars prequel came out, and Ewan McGregor was in it, and he said the first day on the set he was wearing the Jedi robes and he had a lightsaber in his hand, and he saw R2-D2 across the soundstage, and he went, "Holy crap, I'm in Star Wars!" So something like that.
Yeah. Were you by far the youngest member of the group at the time?
Yeah, I was for a long time, and in most of the bands I played in New York for a long time, I was always the youngest guy in the band, and now it's changed.
You're the old guy, huh?
I'm the old guy.
Who else was in the group when you joined?
Essiet on bass, Javon Jackson on saxophone, Brian Lynch on trumpet, and Frank Lacey, and then later Steve Davis on trombone, and also Donald Harrison was playing saxophone too.
Oh, that's killer. Did you record a bunch with Blakey, or?
We did 2 official albums. We did one called Chippin' In, and we did one called One for All. And then I think one came out from a few years ago from a concert we did in Leverkusen, Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a mentor, I used to work with Ralph Peterson, the drummer, who really idolized Art for good reasons, and sort of kind of had the same fire to my ears. Yeah. Was Art, did he give you literal advice, or did you just learn from example, or how did he do his mentoring? I'm just kind of curious on how that happened.
It was mostly just kind of from the bandstand, although he would say things like "play like you got a gun to your head" or "feel like it's your last day on earth." But it was ways of encouraging us. It was kind of rough around the edges the way that he would talk, but it was like, it was all very positive and very encouraging and full of love, right, and well-meaning. And I remember we were on tour in Japan when the first Gulf War thing happened with Saddam Hussein.
Whoa.
And a couple of us were pretty young, and we thought, and there was they were talking for like about a week about reinstating the draft or something, which never happened, but we were scared, right? And so Art said, "Don't worry, fellas, and I'm trying to do his voice, he said, "Don't worry, fellas, if the army calls you up, I'll go down there and talk to him." Yeah. Like, I'll straighten it out for you, don't worry.
You probably would. You probably would have. Yeah. That's great.
They're jazz musicians, you can't.
Yeah, that was kind of true. Culturally irreplaceable, really. And then, so it all, in the end, you only ended up, the band only lasted about a year, right? After because Art did he fall ill? He fell ill after a little bit.
He had cancer. He was unwell most of the time I was in the band, but it didn't seem to affect the music any. When he got on drums, it was just 1,000%, full on fire all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know in some cases, when artists of all kinds have an experience earlier in their career, they're kind of known for it forever. in good ways and in limiting ways. It's only been positive, right? People associating with Blakey. Is there anything that constricts you, or it seems like
Oh,
it would never? Yeah.
no, listen, I don't mind. I mean, it really was only 1 year of my life in my career, but it made such a profound impact on me, just musically and just in so many ways, observing him as a band leader, watching how he would program the sets of music he did and adjust them to sort of the needs of the audience, the perception of what was happening. He was very alert and we didn't just do one thing all the time, you know? Like,
Right.
for example, for a concrete example, like we had a couple of quote unquote hits for, Moanin' and Blues March,
Sure.
sort of the biggest Messenger hits. And you could see when the audience was kind of like, all right, it's time to throw in one of the hits. They're starting to get fancy or whatever. And things like that. He always had a variety of tempos and styles and mixing older Messengers compositions that people knew and loved with newer stuff that we were writing and bringing in. And he had a great banter with the audience all the time. He would make sure that he would talk everybody up and really let everybody know who they were listening to and why it was important and all that kind of
That's
stuff.
great. So you're an educator now also. What's your official title? What position are you in?
I teach piano at the Juilliard School.
Oh, okay. That's pretty simple. It's pretty
I
close.
also have courses on openstudiojazz.com.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you lead ensembles also, or is it mostly
No,
just
I have
one of-
private students, just private piano.
Okay. Do you use anything that you learned from Blakey? I mean, consciously in teaching, or it's probably more hardcore piano.
In combination with the things I learned from Ray Brown or from Art Farmer or Benny Golson or Christian McBride or Chris Botti or any David Sanborn or any one of the number Dianne Reeves or any number of people that I've worked with over my 35-year career so far. A lot of it revolves around being adaptable in terms of an accompanist, knowing when to play more or play less, or
Right.
And there's all kinds of those kinds of professional considerations, showing up on time or early for work,
Right.
Things that are going to keep you working, being open-minded and willing to take on learning a piece of music that may be something that's outside of your comfort zone.
Right. Totally.
Those kinds of,
Yeah. I think it's, again, I feel a very distant kinship with you, being a jazz head from the Midwest who moved to New York. Obviously, I wasn't performing, but it scared the heck out of me. I mean, the whole thing overwhelmed me, but it was also like a kid in a candy store. I've seen you mention like all the great clubs in the 80s. I'm a little older than you, but they still were all happening, like Sweet Basil and stuff like that. And were you just outside of the music stuff? How much of an adjustment was it moving into New York and dealing with all of those realities?
Oh man, it was serious culture shock. I moved from a small town in Wisconsin. I went to Boston for a year, went to Berkeley, and was also kind of visiting New York while I was living in Boston. But moving to New York officially and living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which was not like a hipster.
I did that.
Like a whole, like, scary and cheap. But this is the 80s, so there still was a lot of stuff going on in New York that's happening now. But no, it was really culture shock, and again, I didn't feel that I was very well equipped to handle a lot of it, and just the culture of being on the road too, and traveling and all that. Like, again, ask about being the youngest guy in the band. Most of the guys that were in Blakey's band had been on the road in other bands before. Brian had been out with Eddie Palmieri and Horace Silver, and Essiet had been out with Abdul Ibrahim and many, many others. So there was that experience. For me, it was kind of my first major gig. And it was,
You're not in Kansas anymore.
But sometimes, the only way to learn is to make mistakes. So
it's so true. Yeah. No, I remember I used to come up out of the subway and I'd immediately, this is obviously before GPSs and stuff, and I'd immediately start going in a direction because I was convinced people who wanted to rob me were looking to see if I was a tourist or something. And and I ended up like 3 blocks away and I was going the wrong direction. I was just over. Anyway, this isn't about me. So,
so you had to walk you always had to look like you knew where you were going.
Exactly. Yeah. My last question was just, with a duo, I mean, are you limited with what venues you could? I mean, because obviously it can't play a club, right? Because it's too loud. But versatile do you think it is, and do you seek out? I mean, actually, I have to say so. It's a perfect venue for this because it's super quiet. I mean, it's not like a club environment. But I was wondering what types of venues you like to play with this configuration.
Yeah, I mean, on this tour, we're playing some performing arts centers. We're playing some intimate venues like the Carytown Concert House in Ann Arbor, Treelawn, which fits nicely into kind of both of those categories. And although I mean, we could play a club. I think a club, if people were eating and drinking, I think if the actual act on stage were something quieter and more intimate, that they may opt to listen to it. So I've heard great solo piano in clubs, you know.
Right.
It just depends on what it is.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited. So again, this is Geoffrey Keezer and Gillian Margot this Wednesday. I'm at Treelawn Music Hall. The music starts at 7:30 p.m. Doors open at 6:30 p.m. We're in the Collinwood area, just off of I-90, just a block down from the Beachland Ballroom, which is a big landmark for a lot of people. So thanks again, Geoffrey. We're really looking forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Yep, you bet.